Well, g'day curd nerds. Today we're going to be making Buttermilk Blue. So Buttermilk Blue is inspired by an award-winning cheese out of Wisconsin made by Roth K's, I believe. That's the company that makes it. I managed to find this recipe, or a variation of, in Mary Carlin's book, Artisan Cheese Making at Home. Now, I had to modify it quite heavily to get a decent sized cheese. I wanted one that was about 8 litres. The one in the book was quite small at only 2 litres, so I scaled it right up. So this cheese contains milk. I'm using milk by cow, the cold pressed raw milk that we get here in Australia. It also has cultured buttermilk, quite a bit of that, and some heavy cream or thick cream that is pure. It has no additives, no gelatin, no carrageenan or anything like that. So fairly natural cheese, has Penicillium roqueforti to make it a blue cheese, of course, and a starter culture. So it's going to be quite tangy because of the buttermilk and really creamy because of the extra cream that I added to the cheese. So let me get on and show you how we made Buttermilk Blue.
So don't forget to sanitize your equipment. I'm just boiling all of my stainless steel stuff there, including spoons and whatnot, including the cheesecloths as well. Make sure you boil those. The ingredients I'm using today are cold pressed raw milk made by cow, and some pure cream with no additives, and some buttermilk. And there is all the equipment laid out just before I start on a clean tea towel, ready to go. So the ingredients for this cheese are 4 litres or 4 quarts of whole cow's milk, 2 litres or 2 quarts of cultured buttermilk. You should be able to find that in the supermarket or make it yourself. 1 litre or 1 quart of heavy cream with no additives. 1/8 of a teaspoon of MM100 or MO36R. They're usually aromatic mesophilic cultures. 1/64 of a teaspoon of Penicillium roqueforti for the initial add to the milk. Then you're going to need some more for later on. 1/2 teaspoon or 2.5 millilitres of calcium chloride diluted in 1/4 cup or 60 mils of non-chlorinated water. 1/2 teaspoon or 2.5 mils of single strength rennet. I'm using IMCU 200, but there's a range there for you. That's diluted in 1/4 cup of non-chlorinated water as well. And you'll need about 1.5 tablespoons of non-iodized salt. So once all your ingredients are mixed up, we're going to heat the milk up to 32 degrees Celsius or 90 Fahrenheit. It's fairly thick and creamy, as you can see there. So firstly, we're going to add the culture. I'm using MO36R by Sacco. It's an aromatic mesophilic culture. And then I'm going to sprinkle the Penicillium roqueforti mold over the top as well. This is the blue mold to make the Buttermilk Blue. Now, I should have extracted the spoon beforehand, so I'm just gently doing that now without disturbing the cultures. Okay, we're going to put the lid on and we're going to allow that to rehydrate. After I take it off the heat, I don't want it to heat up anymore. And we're going to allow that to rehydrate for 5 minutes. So 5 minutes later, just take the lid off. And we're going to stir in the cultures and molds, or the culture and mold. So just a check of the temperature, it's still at 32, hasn't crept up very much, which is really good. Give it a bit more stir just to make sure that they're all thoroughly mixed through. So now we're going to cover the pot and allow it to ripen or acidify for 30 minutes. And I'm going to take it off the heat again as well. Now remember that the buttermilk already has cultures within it as well, so this will be fairly tart. So if you're going to use calcium chloride, and I really should have, you need to add it now. Please make sure you add calcium chloride. Doesn't matter what kind of milk you're using. Okay, now I'm going to add the rennet. And give that a stir for no more than 1 minute. So cover that up and allow it to set for 90 minutes. So that's an hour and a half. So after that time's elapsed, we're going to get our curd knife and check for a clean break. And that would be the sloppiest break I've ever seen in a very, very long time. So not the best. I should have added the calcium chloride. Anyway, so I covered it up and I waited for another 30 minutes. Now this may not happen for you if you added the calcium chloride. So after the 30 minutes, I checked it again and it was still fairly sloppy, very poor curd set, and I thought, what the heck am I going to do with this? So I decided to go ahead and cut the curds anyway. So cutting them in 2.5 centimetre or 1 inch cubes. Which are fairly large. You want the cubes to retain a fair bit of their moisture. But as you can see, not many cubes there at all. Anyway, so normally you would allow the curds to heal for 10 minutes. Now if they are firm, then stir for another 10 minutes and allow them to rest for 15 and then drain down to the level of the curds. However, mine were nowhere near firming up. So I went to the next step, which is ladle the curds into a butter muslin lined colander. So just gently ladle that into the colander. Now, don't even attempt to pour it if your curd did not set like mine, because it will smash and fracture the remaining curds that you have, and it will just drain through the butter muslin. We're trying to preserve some of the curds here. So looking good so far. So we're going to allow the curds to drain for 30 minutes. And that's before it starts draining. And that's after it starts draining. And it drained fairly well. I was very impressed actually that we kept most of the curds. So now we're going to tie the opposite ends of the butter muslin to form a bag. So grab the opposite sides, just tie a granny knot, double granny knot, and do the same with the other sides, and you'll have yourself a rudimentary little hanging bag. So grab a pot, pop it over it, and then hang it off a kitchen knob like that, and allow it to drain for 24 hours or until the whey stops dripping. So it's going to look something like that, fairly firm, a little bit like very firm cream cheese. Now remember, this has a very high fat content, so it's going to look something like this anyway after it's drained. So I'm just using a normal cheesecloth now and lining a basket with it. This is the 165mm basket, or I think it's 6.5 inches that I normally use. So just roll that out of the cloth, which is a little bit stiff. And yeah, it does break apart, so that's perfect. It's quite firm. So just rest it in there. We're going to break up the curds into thumb-sized pieces, and we're going to quarter fill the basket with approximately quarter of the curds, of course. So just gently pat them down. Don't press too hard because you want air gaps in the curd so that the blue vein can grow. I'm going to get our trusty mini measuring spoons. And we're going to measure out 1/64 of a teaspoon or a drop. And we're going to sprinkle blue mold all over the layer of the curds. So we're going to add a quarter of the curds on top of that, just breaking up into thumb-sized pieces again. And then just gently patting it down. So we're going to add another layer of the Penicillium roque 40 or blue mold spores over the top of the curds. And then add another quarter of the curds. And just gently pat that down, and you guessed it, we're going to, a little bit more curds there. You guessed it, we're going to sprinkle some more blue mold spores over the top of the curds. It's another 1/64 of a teaspoon. And then just finally top that with the rest of the curds, which should be still a quarter left, all being well. So ultimately you've got 3 layers of the Penicillium roque 40 in your cheese. So we're going to fold over the cheesecloth and then top it with the follower. Now, very rudimentary pressing for this cheese. We don't want to close up the air holes that we've created with the chunks of curd. We want the Penicillium roque 40 to grow in those cracks. Now we're going to apply just 1 kilogram or 2.2 pounds of pressure for 12 hours. I'm just using a 1 kilogram honey pot, which I'll be making mead out of soon. So 12 hours later, we're going to remove the cheese from the basket. Now at this stage, very gently, because the cheese hasn't fully formed, so we're going to carefully turn it. There we go. And then wrap it back up again and pop it back into the basket. And once again, just fold it over on top of the follower and press it 1 kilogram or 2.2 pounds for another 12 hours. So 12 hours later, we're going to remove the cheese from the basket again. And we're just going to put it on the rack of a ripening box, and we're going to add 1 teaspoon of salt on the top of the cheese, and then give that a little rub. And then we're going to flip that over, and we're going to add 2 teaspoons of salt on the other surface, which is really now the top. So we're going to loosely cover that and allow it to drain for 5 hours. After the 5 hours, pop it in the cheese fridge at 13 Celsius, 55 Fahrenheit at 80% relative humidity for 1 week. So after a week, you'll see a little bit of blue mold on the outsides. And we're going to pierce it all the way through using my stainless steel thermometer 7 times and then 4 times horizontally. All the way through. Now, hopefully your cheese is formed up like mine has, which is good, and you won't have too many troubles and you won't get any cracks or fissures in the cheese itself. So now we're going to lightly salt the top, bottom, and sides of the cheese again. Just a little sprinkle, and then give it a rub. So this is about 1/4 teaspoon of salt on each surface. Just a little rub, pop it back on the mat, and pop it back into the ripening box. And we're going to ripen at 10 to 13 degrees Celsius or 50 to 55 Fahrenheit at 80% relative humidity for 6 weeks. Mold should really grow at about the 10-day mark. So this is 3 weeks after piercing. Not a lot of moisture on the lid, which is great. The humidity is quite high in there, but you can see all the wrinkles from the blue cheese, the blue mold, growing all over the surface. Now, it will be a bit tacky, so you will get skin slip if you handle it too much. So after 6 weeks of piercing, it's now ready for the next stage. You'll see a little bit of white mold growth on there as well, but that's okay. That hasn't really done anything to it. But a nice coverage all around, as you can see. So what we're going to do now is scrape off the mold with a flat knife. Now I'm using the back of my curd knife, which is nice and even, and just gently scrape off. You don't want to dig into the cheese, just want to gently scrape off the blue mold that has grown on the surface. Now I'm just using a cold water tap, and that gets rid of the mold that sticks to the knife very simply. Now I don't want to dig into it too much. You can leave a little bit of the blue mold behind, that's fine. Now the sides were the stickiest, so I just had to be quite gentle there. But all in all, the cheese is holding up quite well. It is starting to get quite creamy underneath, as in tacky. But that's what blue cheese, this sort of blue cheese, is like. Remember, this has a lot of fat content within it, including the buttermilk and the heavy cream that we added to the milk. Okay, there we go, all cleaned up. So now we're going to wrap it in aluminium foil, just to keep the mold growth at bay. So I've put the shiny side there, and I'm putting the cheese on the shiny side. I don't really think there's much of a difference, so I've read on the internet. So just plop it on there, and we're going to wrap the cheese up. So just gently, so you've got some flat surface there. Don't crumple it up too much. Kind of see what I'm doing there. Okay, so no air gaps, which is great. And a little bit of a pat. So we're going to place the cheese back into a clean ripening box. You can use the same one. I cleaned it up with hot soapy water. And we're going to ripen at 4 degrees Celsius in the kitchen fridge or 39 Fahrenheit for 4 weeks. And we're going to turn it weekly for those 4 weeks.
So there you have it, Buttermilk Blue. A little bit fiddly to make, as you saw, and my make didn't go quite as planned. The curd set was not very good, but I adapted and overcame and produced quite a nice looking and smelling, if you're into blue cheese, nice smelling cheese as well. It's wrapped up in its foil now. I've got shiny side down, and I'm going to be putting this into the kitchen fridge at 4 degrees Celsius. I think that's 39 Fahrenheit for another month. It's probably edible now. It's been maturing for the for 6 weeks, getting that blue coating that I just scraped off. And I think another 4 weeks and we'll get the full flavour throughout the cheese. And maybe a little bit softer in the middle. Soft on the outside, needs to be a little bit more softer in the middle. Anyway, thanks for watching, Curd Nerds. If you'd like to make this, we have blue cheese kits online using the same moulds that I use, and you can go and check that out at littlegreenworkshops.com.au. Thanks to all my patrons who support the show financially. If you want to be a patron or a YouTube member, then you can find the links in the description below. Well, thanks for watching, Curd Nerds, and I'll see you next time.